Morris has considerable experience with emissions profiling and some good advice on how councils can work together. That's been a consistent theme through all of today, is collaboration. So can I welcome Morris to the stage.
Thank you very much for all of you who decided to stay. And I realized I'm the last speaker between drinks and you leaving, going home for the weekend. So when I considered my speech for the day, I thought, well, what can I do to capture your attention? So I thought I'll find a headline that might do the trick. So I found this: climate change, this the worst scientific scandal of our generation. And then there's obviously still quite a few people out there who just don't care who's moving forward and saying what the matter might be. They still think they're all lying, including the climate scientists. If any one of you believe this, pay very good attention. Obviously, I'm not leading this, and I think it's a whole lot of rubbish. So I thought I'll just try and demonstrate why what we're doing here is important today. So first of all, I just want to say, if there's any media in the room, if you could please stop asking people if they believe in climate change and ask them if they understand it. It's a very big difference, which I will explain later as well. So why does it matter? I'm not going to read through the whole list just because of the time that we've got at the moment, but just let me read out one here. Oman has recorded the hottest ever global overnight temperature minimum recorded ever, of 42.6 degrees Celsius. Just imagine that. I was in Sydney a few years ago when they had about 40 degrees in late November, and they're currently experiencing temperature extremes of about 42 degrees on really bad days. Under a 2 degrees scenario, they're predicting a 14-degree increase in maximum temperatures. It's 56 degrees. I don't want to be in Sydney at 56 degrees. All right. The other really important point I want to make is climate with weather. There's a very, very big difference. A lot of people mistake the two. So weather is what we experience over hours, days, and weeks, especially in Wellington. Climate is what we're experiencing over decades to millennia. And that's a very important distinction. So just because it's a very cold summer, or it's a cold snap coming through, or it's a bit of rain, it doesn't mean it's climate change. None of the examples I gave in the previous slide actually say, or are demonstrating that this is actually caused because of climate change. It's the long-term trends that are important. Of the hottest years ever recorded, 9 of them happened in the last 15 so years. The one exemption is the ninth hottest year, which was 1998. So it's all in the last few years, and we're currently seeing, if you look at the graph, there's a very clear indication that we are causing climate change. It's all because of the emissions we put in the atmosphere. And if there's any doubt, I'm very happy to meet you at the bar afterwards to talk about the detail behind that. So what are we trying to achieve? With no action on climate, or no changes in how we do things, we're probably heading for 4.5 degrees Celsius increase by the end of this century. Just remember the 54 degrees increase in Sydney and the 2 degree scenario. Imagine what it might be like in cities at a 4.5 degrees increase. With current nationally determined contributions, we are heading about 3.5 degrees. So what we're really here for is to look at this. How do we get down from there to the 2 degrees that we've signed up on in Paris? So I'm here to talk about greenhouse gas reporting. What can you do to do your emissions? And I understand it's a very complex topic, and I don't really want to go into too much detail just given the hour of the day. So I'll just adopt a kind of more overview approach to this. So there's two types of reporting: production versus consumption. Virtually all reporting that you see is production-based. It's emissions generated within a current boundary. And the reason for this is it's easier. The consumption-based is based on what you buy. So the emissions occur elsewhere. Today, we might buy a phone that's been produced in Asia. You would need to account for the emissions. It's very hard to do. So that's why most of the reporting focuses on production-based. There are a few frameworks out there that do consumption-based, but they have a very high uncertainty attached to it. A lot of the reporting is done in what people call scopes. So we've got scope 1 emissions, that's emissions that you are directly responsible for. You drive a car, it's emissions coming out the end, unless you drive an electric vehicle in Christchurch. These are scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 emissions are electricity and heat related emissions. These are again emissions that are generated within New Zealand, but you've got no direct control over. And then scope 3 is everything else. When they first came out with these standards, they only focus on scope 1 and 2 reporting. Soon after, they realized that scope 3 is actually where the majority of the emissions lie. And then lastly, emissions are measured in what's called, every climate gas has a global warming potential, and they're just trying to reference everything back to CO2. So if you look at CO2, the green dot on the left there, it's the reference is 1. If you look at methane, 1 molecule of methane has 34 times the impact of, on the climate that we have from CO2. N2 about 300, and SF6, which is used in electrical switchgear, 23,500. So it's very important what kind of gas we're looking at. But to bring it all back, we always then convert it to a ton CO2 equivalent, so that's the TCO2e. Right, what's not included? We're only looking at fossil emissions, so any biogenic fuel sources are not included. So CO2 from trees that are combusted is not included, CO2 from humans by breathing is not included, CO2 from landfill gas is not included. It's all part of the short carbon cycle you can see on the top right there. We only include biomass and dead dinosaurs that have been underground for millions of years, because adding them to the atmosphere is what causes climate change, or climate change. Alright, so with that as a background and a small science lecture, what can we do to do reporting? So there's 2 types of reports, corporate reporting and community reporting. The first part, I'm just going to very briefly touch on, is the corporate reporting. Very well established frameworks out there. Most commonly, people use the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. It's one of the earliest standards that came out, and that really describes what you need to measure under scope 1 and 2, and provide some clear guidance how you can do that. As I said earlier, after a few companies have done this for a few years, they realized that scope 3 emissions are major sources, and then they developed a new standard called the Corporate Value Chain Accounting Standard, which looks entirely at scope 3 emissions. So this is probably considered international best practice at the moment, looking at this. And then underlying or in conjunction with this, a lot of people use the ISO 14064 series for reporting, which is very similar to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, provides probably a little bit more basic framework of what should be included, and gives guidance on how people should be reporting. So these are probably the 3 key standards, and there's a raft of service providers out there that offer to produce corporate carbon footprints, and I'm not going to go through the list. There's some fear of forgetting someone, but if you would like to know any more, again, please come and see me afterwards. So what's required for carbon footprint? For corporate carbon footprint, it's mostly around your fuel data, coal, gas, energy use data, emissions from your air conditioning systems, air travel, and for many councils, surprisingly, actually, landfill data is the most important part. If you own and operate a landfill, there's a very good chance that you have the majority of your emissions will be from the landfill. So if you look at that example, the pie chart on the top right there, in that example, 70% of the emissions came from scope 1, and of that, 90% or more was from the landfill. It's just the way the accounting works. So if you take the landfill emissions out, you can look at the bottom graph, and in this case you can see that the scope 3 emissions are, again, the most important sources. So again, I would encourage you, if you are looking at doing a corporate carbon footprint, at least use the scope 3 value chain guide as an example to guide you and incorporate these emission services. And lastly, I want to talk to you about community level reporting, which has been mentioned already a number of times today. There are, again, 2 very specific frameworks out there, the Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emissions and PES 2070. In New Zealand, all of the cities that have currently signed up to the Global Carbon Mayors are using the GPC, the framework on the left. And that's also, in my view, the international, most commonly used framework. Provides very, very detailed pathways of how you report, and provides options of what you, how you can tackle certain emission sources. And yes, it's probably a very good source. It's freely available. Both of them are actually freely available online. Just need to Google for the names, and you can download them. Lastly, I want to mention the Global Covenant of Mayors for Energy and Climate. Could have probably chosen a shorter name. They're currently working on a common reporting framework, which will be released next week in San Francisco. And that again will give a bit more guidance on what cities are required to comply with under the framework, and reporting under the Global Carbon Mayors. And as mentioned before, again, there's 6 cities currently in New Zealand that have signed up, and I would encourage you all, as Kevin said earlier, to investigate this if that's something for your council. It provides a very clear framework of what you can do or what you have to do, and it's a very good, provides a very good pathway for councils to work through. So I would definitely encourage you to look. The 2 tools I wanted to highlight today that are freely available are the Sirius tool and the Curb tool. Both of these tools allow you to report your emissions. They're not necessarily that well designed for users. They're somewhat complex, and also in the New Zealand context, a lot of our emissions coming from agriculture and forestry. Unfortunately, I don't provide all the details, but it's certainly tools that can be used free of charge online, and with a bit of reading into those frameworks can be applied by any council. I've already mentioned the Global Cabinet of Mayors. The process that you follow there is you sign up, basically pledge your commitment over a 4-year period, develop your carbon footprint in accordance to the GPC, and then report to through the CDP process or the Carbon Climate Registry. You need to develop a climate change risk and vulnerability assessment, set ambitious emission reduction targets, and then lastly, develop a full climate action plan. So as you can see, there's more than 9,000 cities internationally have signed up to this framework, currently 6 in New Zealand, but I would expect it to be a few more once the government has confirmed the ambition with around zero carbon economy and what that might mean for councils. So what's required for a community emissions inventory? Very similar to the corporate one. You need to look at your energy consumption in the community, gas use, coal use, LPG, biofuel, electricity. Most of this data is freely available. Transport data, fuel sales within your district or city, air travel data, port activities, waste, very similar to council organizational footprints, agricultural emissions based on annual numbers within your districts or cities, forestry by area, and then lastly a number of different sources for emissions vectors, such as the New Zealand National Inventory or MFE's guidance for voluntary reporting. So, as I said earlier, I don't want to go into too much detail. The Sirius tool, if you just Google for Sirius, you get a tool that looks roughly like this. I thought I'd spare you. But as I said, it's not that difficult. It's a very clear process, and it explains what you need to do at the front. And then the Curb tool, again, it looks very similar. I didn't bother to take a picture, but Curb has an added advantage. It provides you with some access around mitigation actions. So it provides a process for you to consider mostly your energy and transport emissions, and then identify potential options to mitigate these emissions. So again, very useful. It also helps you set targets and provides a process for abatement curves. So I would encourage you to have a look at that. With a note of caution, it's a fairly complex tool. I think it's a 25 megabyte Excel file, so it does take some getting used to. All right, take home messages. All greenhouse gas carbon footprints are estimates only. No one's measuring emissions, and therefore you don't need any decimals. So it's not important if it's 125, 126. The trend is important. All of these numbers include uncertainty. They're all based on specific assumptions and boundaries, but transparency is key here. You need to tell people what you've done so that they can understand how they can follow these emissions and then redo them if necessary. As a result, they're sometimes difficult to compare, but again, that's okay. Because what you're after is consistency. You want to apply a framework, a set of uncertainties, a set of calculations, a set of data sources, and then look at the trend over time. Because ultimately, this is what we're after. That's what we need to reduce. We need to look at how we can reduce our emissions from the start to, say, 2050. So, for Milliken, for example, we were able to develop a trend like this. And that's 15 years of emissions data for the different sectors I mentioned earlier, and you can see they're going up in some years and down other years. And if you only looked at them individually and argued about the numbers behind the comma, it would be very difficult to see the woods for the trees. But overall, you can see there's a very small reduction from the base year 2000 to the last year 2014-15, with the target for the council, I think, if I remember correctly, was about a 3% reduction by the time which they had achieved. So this is ultimately what you're after, but it does take some time. So hopefully I haven't gone over too much and tried to race through my presentation to catch up. Great, thank you. So if you have any other questions, and please come and see me afterwards. Thank you very much.